Zara huddled in the dimly lit corner of the cargo hold, her delicate wings wrapped tightly around her shivering body. All around her, the cacophony of terrified shrieks and muffled sobs echoed off the cold metal walls. She was one of the Unchosen, a rare Aurari female born with a genetic defect that prevented her from joining the hive mind that bonded her species together. On her home world of Ardian, the Unchosen were considered abominations, sentenced to a life of subjugation and exile from society. The rusted door creaked open, and a hulking figure stepped inside, silhouetted by the harsh corridor lights. Zara shrank back against the wall as the unmistakable form of a Biner slaver filled the doorway. His compound eyes swept over the pitiful cargo hold, mandibles clicking with delight at the mewing prisoners contained within. "New batch of slaves just came in from Nessa," a gruff voice announced over the comms. "Throw him in with the others, but keep the defective Aurari females separate. The Sarones pay extra for those freaks." Zara's heart pounded in her thorax as she watched in horror while the terrified Unchosen were dragged out one by one. She knew the hellish fate that awaited them as playthings and curiosities in the depraved dens of the criminal underworld. Better to die here aboard this wretched ship, she thought desperately, than to endure that kind of unending torment. Suddenly, a strange sound pierced the nightmarish scene. A calm, measured voice broadcasting over an open channel in a language unlike any Zara had heard before. "This is Captain Valeria Riggs of the Earth Alliance Vanguard-class vessel Intrepid," the voice announced. "We've detected unauthorized trafficking of sentient beings in this sector and are moving to intercept the hostile craft. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded, or you will be fired upon." The Biner slaver froze in his tracks, realizing they were surrounded. "How did they find us in the black cluster?" he muttered incredulously. Before he could finish, a brilliant beam of crimson energy sliced through the darkness, severing one of the Biner's armored limbs in a spray of noxious ichor. Zara scrambled back in terror as a deafening alarm blared, nearly splitting her auditory canals. "You're surrounded," Captain Riggs' voice resonated through the ship. "Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any further hostile action will be met with maximum force." The Biner ship rocked violently as more beams of scorching phaser fire hammered its hull. Howls of panic echoed through the hold as prisoners huddled together, realizing their fates now hung in the balance of this skirmish between the slavers and this new, terrifying alien force. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Captain Rourke stood stoically amidst the organized chaos unfolding around her. Her crew worked in perfect synchrony, systematically disabling the Biner craft systems. "Their shields are down, and thruster capabilities have been neutralized, Captain," her tactical officer reported crisply. "But we're detecting a surge in their warp core. They're trying to overload it and take us with them in one final cowardly act." Rourke's jaw set grimly. "Not on my watch. Everett, can we beam their core out into space before it breaches?" Chief Everett's fingers flew across his console. "I can try, Captain. Locking on to the core's cyclical pathway now." With a whine of energy, the overloading Biner warp core materialized in the shimmering transport buffer, then vanished, jettisoned into the void. "Core jettisoned, Captain," Everett announced with a satisfied grin. "The Biner slaver is dead in space." Rourke ordered heavily armed security teams to materialize throughout the pirate vessel, quickly overwhelming the few slavers who still offered feeble resistance. The terrified prisoners were beamed aboard the Intrepid for medical treatment. A pair of burly Earth Alliance Marines dragged the maimed Biner captain before Rourke on the bridge. "Your reign of terror ends here, slaver scum," she growled, staring defiantly at the squirming alien. "Your ship and all its data logs have been seized. You'll face justice for your crimes." The Biner glared at her with his remaining eyes.
Crime?
"We supply product for a demand. The universe has no use for misfits and defectives." He coughed up a thick glob of sickly yellow fluid. "Finish it, human, or sell me back into slavery. We'll see which fate is more merciful in the end." Rourke felt a surge of revulsion, but steeled herself with a reminder that she had saved countless innocents this day. "Take him to the brig and find out who hired this freak and where his buyers are holed up. I want the whole slavers network burned to the ground." As the Biner was dragged away howling, Rourke turned her gaze to the view screen, where the freed prisoners were being tended to in the Intrepid's shuttle bay. Among them, she noticed a lone Arari female, her wings wrapped protectively around her. Their gazes met, and Rourke felt a profound determination harden within her. She would find those responsible for this atrocity and make them pay, no matter how far she had to pursue them. The Intrepid raced through the inky blackness of the Theta Dark Nebula, its passing marked only by a faint shimmer of distortion. Inside its armored flanks, a hive of frenzied activity centered around the CIC, the nexus of the ship's combat nerve center. "We've traced the warp trail from the Biner Slaver back to this region," the ops officer reported. "Rescue teams have identified multiple star charts in their navigation database coded for these coordinates." Rourke studied the holographic map displaying the Dark Nebula. "So, this is where they've been bringing their stocks," she said heavily. "Smack in the middle of one of the most hazardous interstellar dust fields in the entire quadrant. It would play hell with sensors and give them perfect cover to move slaves around undetected." She straightened, fixing her crew with a steely gaze. "We need to find out exactly where these slavers are. Hold up and shut them down for good. Start a systematic wideband scan of the entire dust cloud, disable their jamming frequencies however you can, and upload those NAV coordinates to the Rikers M. I want recon probes swarming every cubic parsec of this region." There was a resounding chorus of "Aye, Captain," echoed around the bridge. Rourke felt a pang of anxiety knot her stomach. How many sentient beings were trapped somewhere in the suffocating depths of the Dark Nebula, even now being tortured and violated in ways she dared not imagine? How many innocents had already been robbed of freedom, hope, and dignity for the vile trade of these slavers united in criminal cartel? Rourke knew there would be no rest for her crew or herself until this blight against all civilized life had been scoured from existence. The holographic sphere of the Dark Nebula pulsed and warped as tactical data began streaming in from countless dispersed probes and sensor platforms. Slowly but surely, areas of interest began highlighting themselves within the tumultuous dust clouds, faint signatures that could potentially be traced back to energy emissions and spacecraft power sources. "I've got something big, massive power signatures dead ahead," the sensor operator called out, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. "Readings are not consistent with any known spatial body." Rourke leaned in closer, studying the strange flickering graphical disturbance in the holomap's depths. Something didn't feel right. But before she could give the order, every display in the CIC lit up in a blinding fury of cascading alerts and overloaded screens. A deafening cacophony drilled into Rourke's senses as she instinctively raised her hands to cover her ears against the onslaught of discord, noise, and light. Slowly, the shrieking maelstrom gave way to a terrifying electronic rumble that seemed to reverberate straight into the crew's bones. An unmistakable bass-heavy pattern, not unlike a voice but seemingly transmitted across a frequency never meant for biological receipt. Where on the holomap, the strange shifting nexus of distortion seemed to intensify, almost coalescing into a vaguely geometric pattern within the nebular clouds. Then, a horrifyingly deep synthesized voice erupted from every speaker, vibrating the deck, plating itself. "We are the emitter. These dust clouds are the domain of our diaspora. Leave now or be absorbed." Rourke stirred in shock and confusion as the bizarre, haunting transmission repeated itself again in that bone-shaking digital tongue. What in the hell was an emitter, and what did it mean by absorbed? She opened her mouth to demand answers, but was cut off. By a frantic shout from the ops pit, Captain Yara heard, "I'm reading a massive power surge closing in on us at the main viewer." The inscrutable roiling of the nebula seemed to intensify, with darker and lighter areas writhing across the screen as if alive. "Evasive maneuvers!" Yara shouted over the rising din. "Get us out of this maelstrom!" But as the Intrepid's powerful thrusters flared and the inertial dampers strained to counteract the savage changes in velocity, a bizarre sight emerged on the view screen that stole Yara's breath away. Impossibly, the nebular gases themselves seemed to be twisting together into complex, almost geometric forms that defied the laws of physics. Conduits of energized plasma snaked outwards, reaching across the void as if being remotely sculpted into a multifarious lattice of shimmering alien tendrils. In mere moments, those tendrils joined into thicker cable-like structures, encircling, engulfing, and subsuming the hapless Intrepid in a cage of what felt sickeningly like living circuitry. What in the... Yara gasped in stunned horror as the alien tendrils latched onto every surface of the ship's hull, miniature suns burning to life wherever they made contact. Damage reports from all sections. "What the hell is this thing?" their tactical officer responded first, his voice cracking with panic and disbelief. "Ma'am, it appears to be trying to digitize us." Yara felt her blood turn to ice in her veins, an existential terror gripping her soul. Digitize? How is that even possible? But all too quickly, haunting realization swept over her as hull breaches multiplied, containment fields failed, and a swarm of scintillating filaments snaked their way through every orifice, probing and tasting at the ship itself with almost palpable hunger. Yara slammed her fist down on the comp panel, while burning in her throat as she bellowed the order she'd hoped never to give. "All hands, abandon ship. This is not a drill." But before she could finish, a lance of blinding turquoise light enveloped the entire bridge as every display console and control feed overloaded in a shower of sparks and ruptured circuitry. Yara felt herself lifted, almost suspended, as that eerie alien lattice tightened its grip on her ship, merging with the very power conduits and EPS networks that served as the Intrepid's lifeblood. Around the stricken bridge, her crew floated helplessly, tendrils of ravenous emerald plasma caressing their bodies, appearing to break them down into glittering clouds of shimmering particles. In the final soul-withering moments before oblivion claimed her, Valeria Rourke stared in abject horror as the alien lattice subsumed the Intrepid utterly, transforming ship and crew alike into a radiant tapestry of exotic code before blinking out of existence in a searing cosmic flash. Amid the clouds of her vaporized home, the lone Arari female calling herself Zyla floated in stunned silence, the only survivor of the Intrepid's nightmare encounter with the Emerdace's Brex. A lifetime of oppression and degradation had almost snuffed out her last flickers of hope and compassion, but those final soul-scourging moments outside the Nebula prison had reignited something deep within her, something primal, determined, and unbreakable. Floating alone amid the slowly dispersing debris, Zyla spied something. A solitary reflector bouncing off the incandescence of a nearby pulsar, salvage from the shredded Intrepid. She reached out with a trembling, attenuated limb and snagged the miraculously intact device, examining it closer. Incredibly, it appeared to be an isolated data node containing crypt-telemetry from the doomed ship's sensor array, likely scattered in the explosive force of the attack. And beneath the layers of corrupted code, laced within, was something else. A fragmented burst of transmission, one of humanity's last desperate attempts to warn others of the horror they'd encountered. Static laced the recording, but the message's meaning sliced through Zyla with shocking clarity. "This is Captain Valeria Rourke of the Earth Alliance ship Intrepid. We have made tragic con. Act with extreme caution. We're dealing with an extremely dangerous entity." Yara's voice crackled over the comm miters. "They appear to digitize matter, breaking it down into data. Their processes are consuming us as I speak. To any survivors, stay clear of the Theta Dark Nebula clouds. The Emmers contain their Daysar." Static crackled, drowning out the final anguished pleas as the fragmentary message cut out. But the dire implications sent chills down Zara's already shuddering form. Digitizing matter itself, breaking down solid objects into data clouds to be absorbed, descended beyond even her most terrifying existence as an outcast from Ardian society. Around the stricken Aerodec worlds of the vaporized starship, debris began to coalesce. Particulate streamers of glittering light reformed into alien geometric lattices not unlike what had consumed the Intrepid. Zara's breath caught. Could this be the Dpor X itself, the emitter domain made manifest? As the streamers extended tendrils toward her floating form, Zara felt a sudden, all-consuming terror. The primal drive for self-preservation that even the most subjugated being could never extinguish. Kicking out with her legs, The terrified Arari propelled herself away on a random vector, the shard of human data still clutched protectively in her four limbs. Behind her, the emitter's lattices flickered and reformed, writhing and pulsing with what seemed like predatory curiosity. But some quirk of energized particles or simple luck had spared Zara from immediate assimilation. Now, weaving between the ghostly tendrils, she expelled the last of the ship's recycled air from her ventilators, propelling her slight form deeper into the dust clouds choking miasma. All around, the probing streamers of alien light seemed to react to her wake, shifting and undulating through the nebular fog in silent pursuit. The frantic chase continued for what felt like an eternity until finally, Zara's overwrought body betrayed her, her wings giving out as she gasped for breath in the void. Mercifully, the pursuing emitter apparition seemed to recede, almost disinterested now that their target had effectively fled their domain. Zara floated adrift, her tattered wings fanning out as she shivered in the frozen embrace of the dust cloud. But she was alive, for now at least. Clutching the human data shard closer, Zara felt her heart harden with newfound resolve. After a lifetime of subjugation and exile, she would defy all odds, risking everything to bring the truth of the Emmers to light. If the galaxy sought to crush her, she would endure. If terrors like the Emmers lurked out in the night between worlds, so be it. Zara was unchosen no longer, and her new path, her new purpose, to be the voice that would scream out into the void about the horrors awaiting among the stars, had only just begun.